Which I feel would be scary, and this is a whole nother topic. We can jump into it, but emulation, right? And I feel like that might have been like a scary thing as a store owner. And I think this opens up this whole conversation right here, plain and simply, is where emulation, it's almost like reselling and collecting. Like there was a very long period of time where emulation was like stupid. It was dumb. And trust me, we lived it, we heard it. And I agree that the best way to play a video game, the most enjoyable, there'll never be anything like popping in a cart and playing it. But obviously now at this point, it's more accepted. It's more part of it. Did emulation ever play into your store or like prices? Was there a period where you were like, oh shoot, people are going to start emulating and not care about this stuff?
Yeah, very much so. That was probably maybe like 2-3 years after I'd opened the store. So I opened the store in 2011. I want to say like maybe 2014, 15, all of a sudden like all these emulators started coming out. And yeah, at the time people were like, oh, that's it. Retro games are done. Everybody's just going to emulate this stuff. And so there's been that phase of like, okay, going up against emulation. Then there's always the talks that games are just going to go completely digital. Nobody's going to care about this physical games anymore. So for 12 years now, that there was a lot of worry about, in my mind, that like, okay, this might fail at any point. A couple things I did to kind of like ease my worriness about that was kind of diversifying the store. So like we don't just sell video games, we sell video games, we sell comics, we sell Pokemon cards, we sell vintage clothes, we sell action figures. In case like at any time I was like, okay, nobody wants to play retro games anymore. This is just, the business is gone. You know, I have a family to take care of. So that's kind of eased like a little bit of that worry. And then over the years, I mean, it's just been a slow incline in like interest in collecting in general. Across whether it was Pokemon cards, the action figures, all of that, where I feel more confident now that I'm like, all right, as long as we're still alive, I think people are always going to be interested in these games to some degree. Now, past our generation, like my kids that didn't grow up with Nintendos, or your guys' kids like that didn't grow up with that, I don't know. They might not be. And there might come a point in our lives where we're like, all right, we're not playing these games anymore. We're just buying them. But see, I think we'll even still collect. I think even we could be 60, 70 years old, which isn't that far off anymore, right? It's not that far.
I mean, you got to think about it. You have a guy who's a fan, and he's a 7-year-old collector.
Yeah, actually, a few people who watch our show that comment a lot are upper in the 70s.
And I have a lot of older gentlemen that'll come in that those are most of the Atari and television collectors. They're not us. I don't. Not many people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have a guy who buys most of our Atari stuff, and I think I asked him one time. His name's Reaper67. Shout out to him. And I think he was like, I'm like, oh, are you actually 67? And he was like, yeah, it's almost my birthday. And I was like, awesome. And he's definitely our Atari guy, so to say.
And even at the swap, I always see Ben pick up like Commodores and Ataris. He even owns a Atari 5200 that he's collecting for at the moment. I mean, it's kind of insane because like I have no idea what that system even is.
So right? And I love the old vintage stuff. I'm not so much an Atari player. I remember my dad having an Atari and playing a little bit of Atari. But what I love is like vintage PC gaming, like Atari 520 STs.
I feel like PC gaming is gaining a little bit of traction as far as like in the collecting world, because back then it was like, it was pretty much just Metal Jesus talking about PCs, you know, Metal Jesus back in the big box PC game. But now I feel like even myself, I'm being like, oh, these are cool. These boxes are actually nice. Again, being people who are starting to look at boxes and paperwork. I'm like, hey, this is really cool. Even though I have to admit, it's almost like a weird guilty thing because I technically didn't play that stuff, so to say. So I don't feel bad collecting it, so to say. But I mean, I don't know if I could emulate it. But
I played that. That was
Did
like,
you?
Oh man, we had like
what was your game? Were you like
King's Quest?
So were
King's
you?
Quest.
What level?
Totally different.
What level of nerd were you with PC gaming? Because there's lots of levels, and I say that with respect. My brother was one of the biggest nerds with PC game ever, and with respect, I mean that guy knows games.
I just know my dad at some point, I must have been maybe like 6 or 7, bought some computer. He never used the computer, so it sat in this office. So nobody used it. I think I was the only one in the family that used it. I have an older brother too. Somewhere along the line, I was getting these games. Maybe he was buying them for me. I don't even remember. But I had King's Quest, Police Quests, like Doom early on PC.
I miss Doom.
All those like point and click type adventure games are like, oh my gosh, I love those so much. I could go back and play that right now. You can go on Steam, I think, and you can download
Do
those.
people, this might be the dumbest question ever, do people emulate PC games, or is that like what they are?
Well,
technically?
Steam has a lot of them, if you want to call that emulation, kind of.
Do you find emulation to be wrong? Let's be honest. Everybody does it. everybody emulates and plays emulated stuff. Not saying everyone does the emulating, like the actual work to emulate, but 99.999% of people I know play emulated stuff.
Not wrong, but I do feel like you're missing out on like, I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead. Like people will come in, they'll be like, oh, this is all a bunch of garbage. I can just emulate all this stuff. I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. But like you're missing out on us going out and hunting and finding all this stuff. Like, well, I feel like they think like, oh, I've outsmarted the system somehow. And I'm like, well, you're just missing on all the collecting fun of this.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. Morally wrong, I don't know, like legally and stuff. It doesn't.
I find it interesting. It's just like we as collectors also have been in the space where it's like big companies are now reselling these emulations to you, right? They're selling you the mini classics. They're selling you the hookups to their TV, like the old AV components, Pac-Man, and it's like, what is that any different than us owning the original game?
It's became legal emulating,
right?
So to say.
I feel like it was different back then. Like even like the old school stuff right now, like I got like a double like reward because you remember back in the day you had to make it work when it was like a little older. You'd have to do the little shift and blowing it.
You got the shifter right there,
here.
bro.
So dude, I used to get reward like after doing the shifting, and in my head I'm like, all right, now I gotta play this for at least an hour because I don't know if that thing's gonna start up again. So I mean that was a double reward for me.
And then your cat walks by and its tail graces it. And it's
oh
like,
my gosh!
And you're like, no, God!
Please don't erase. Please don't erase. Please you turn it back on. Erase. Save game erase.
I say that because I experienced that. Mega Man 2, final boss with my brothers, school time, classic story as Tales Old as Time in the retro world. Got to the final boss, paused the game. I'm going to go to school. I can't believe it. We're going to finally stinking beat Mega Man 2. 2 seconds later, I see my cat just walk by, barely grace the Nintendo and just the screen. And I was like...
we used to leave it. Like we would leave it like overnight, go to school, come home the next day and just be like, please be on, please be on. Like I'm right in the middle of this game, you know, no save, no nothing. Like,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, did any of you guys ever leave it on and have it burn that onto the TV?
Yes. Stuff still does that, dude. A Mac computer recently at one of the offices I work at, my buddy Mikey would leave it on. And I went back one day and I turned it off and it was still on the screen. And to this day, you can just see the outline of the browser. And I'm like, dude, that sucks. That sucks.
That's actually crazy.
No, but what you were saying about it being like, you know, companies now are basically, you know, they got smart. They make the classics. It's not, it's technically emulate, or is it? I don't know. I'm not smart with the background.
Or they say like a remaster of like Turtles.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation is remasters, bro, and remakes. And I feel like that stuff to me was very exciting in the beginning, right? Like, oh, dude, they're making an HD this. They're redoing this. And now to the point, even going past just games, right? It's Hollywood, it's movies, it's the Disney movies.
Yeah.
And the excitement I feel like is going like this. It's like,
it's a little
I
deeper
want to play
dust.
Resident Evil 4. I'm not going to lie. The remake. I do want to play that.
I get that. I understand. And I'm with you on a ton of them. I'll play them, right? Like I could play Mario 2 on any console and smile the same, which I feel like Nintendo, man, just found a way to get all of us. I feel like they could release Mario 2 with a different color palette for the next, or Mario 3 for the next 20 years and everyone would buy it.